Hello, world. Welcome to the Breakout Finder podcast. I'm your host, Nate Liss. You can find me on Twitter at @AnOutrageJew. And with me, as always, is Mr. Ryan Lopes. You can find him on Twitter at StillRyan5. And back with us again, arguably the greatest guest we've ever had and the most featured guest we've ever had, Russell Clay. And you can find him on Twitter at RussellJClay. Russell, Ryan, we're back 2 weeks in a row. This show had disappeared for months and months and months. It was on the side of a milk carton, and it is officially back. How are you guys doing tonight?
Get the guest first, buddy. This is you. This is, I don't know if, you've been on multiple times. When we have guests on, man, we roll out the fucking red carpet here. This is your show. I'm trying to say minimal shit tonight.
I would just like to say thank you for the introduction. I feel as though I am the Hamzat Chimaev of this show. Every time I come on, I just roll through the competition and leave with the W and my hand in the air. So happy to be here again. Ready to one-punch knockout. Nobody in particular, but ready to talk about some nerdy stuff.
Russ,
that's what we do.
I really feel like you're poking the bear with all this sort of parallel conversation you're starting. You sound like you want to rehash a conversation that we had over text message 40 minutes ago.
I don't. And see, podcasting 101, if Nate's learned anything from Matt Kelly, it's that when you have someone in a pretzel, you don't tell them until they're on the show. I saw a debate today between how good LeBron James would be in MMA if he just stepped foot in the octagon like tonight. And Nate proved me wrong, but I was like, hey, we could have discussed this on the pod. And I was like, you should have just said, hey, let's save this for the show. I've grappled and trained for 10 years, so I would know things and you would not. And you would be dumb for like 5 minutes. And then you didn't do any of that, which is sad.
It just goes to show that, as most people know, I don't listen to any of the shows that I'm on with Matt Kelly. So I've learned nothing, and that's why I'm at where I'm at, and that's why he is where he is, Russ. But I'm glad that Matt Kelly has come up because I have some big news that I want to announce to the audience, the thousands and thousands of listeners of this great show. And I'm glad Russ was here for this. As of next episode, the Breakout Finder podcast will officially be airing on the Roto Underworld Network from this point forward. It will no longer be hosted at this account. We are taking it over to Matt Kelly, and we're going to spread it to all the great listeners of the Roto Underworld Network. So it's going to be a much greater audience going forward. So if you don't see it in your feed anymore, that's why. I would be shocked if you had this podcast and you didn't have any of the other podcasts. But nonetheless, you can find us there in the future. So hopefully it's only good things going forward, Russ. And Ryan is the curator of every show sheet ever made. He's also the guy who's brought on every guest ever, except I think every time Russ has come on, I've brought Russ on. Is that true?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever invited Rusty. It's always like you and I will talk, Nate, and it's like, I throw out a couple names here and there, and for whatever reason, nothing ever materializes, and then like I'll get like a 48 hours prior, Russ is gonna stop by the way, dude. And it's perfect every time. I don't ever want to be the one that invites Rusty. It won't feel right. It just, the show won't flow the same if I'm the one that extends the invite.
And on Monday, he texted me. He's like, hey, how's Wednesday? And I'm like, oh, no, that's my busiest day of the week. Yeah. I'm going to be dead. Yeah. And he's like, great. So we're doing Wednesday. And I was like, yeah. All right.
That's also the one thing that Nate probably did learn from Matt Kelly. It's no one really ever says no to you, and that's the way Nate, kind of shoehorned me into Wednesdays. Like, dude, we normally do Tuesdays. He said, Ryan, we're rocking Wednesdays. I said, no problem. Nate said, Russ was kind of out, but he's definitely going to be in. So I'm glad this all worked out.
Russ texts me back. He's like, I got to write a 5,000 word paper. I'm like, cool. So see you at 6 p.m. on Wednesday. You'll be there, right?
Yeah.
So
we're good.
Yeah. So I'm glad Russ is here. And Russ, It's only appropriate that the very first thing on this show sheet, again, that Ryan has handcrafted is revolving around a Raiders skill position player. Can we talk about Josh Jacobs and the evolution in 2020, and more specifically, Russ, looking ahead now or going into your 2021 Dynasty startups, is Josh Jacobs a top 5 Dynasty running back?
Well, it's sort of a weird question to ask right now because that tier is just growing. Before these injuries to Saquon and McCaffrey, it was those two at the top, and then all these young guns sort of fighting for the next in line. But now Saquon's out for a year. You have to price that in, regardless of how you feel about Saquon. McCaffrey's going to be out for 40 to 50% of this season, at least the regular season of fantasy football. And we're stuck looking at Jonathan Taylor, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and then the man getting 25 to 30 touches a game in a somehow and suddenly explosive Raiders offense. Shout out to Ryan.
I'm tingling, boys. Listen, the Josh Jacobs question, Nate and I kind of touched on it last week because we were coming off of an Alvin Kamara contract. We were coming off of a Dalvin Cook contract, and now watching Dalvin Cook through 2 weeks. There's a lot of questions about the Minnesota offense, but that's the beauty about Dynasty. You know, we're looking ahead. So to Rusty's point, coupled with new money for Kamara and Cook, coupled with brutal Barkley injuries and a McCaffrey getting dinged up for 6 weeks or however long it is. So there's some injuries now to kind of factor in. I'm not sure the McCaffrey injury moves the needle a ton. Hopefully it's nothing bigger than what we're being told. The Barkley stuff, I mean, ACL sucks, man. So, I mean, I'm curious if Jacobs isn't top 5, you know, somewhere inside the top 5, how far off is he? And given this new Raiders offense, like how close, you know, what does he need to do to firmly plant himself there, I guess is my question.
So again, this goes back to your strategy in general. And I would say if I'm doing a startup and I have the 7th pick, I'll just take whichever one's left. I don't really have a preference. I feel like all these guys have shown themselves to be very impressive. I mean, Jacobs had a fantastic rookie season, and he is clearly building on it. And John Gruden has clearly said, okay, he's getting 350 touches this year. So I'm in on that. This Jonathan Taylor Thomas, as I said, I'm going to call him from now on. And Nate, we're going to get into, I mean, you were probably more coherent at that point, mid-90s. I'm right when, as a 7-year-old Russell Clay, I was marketed Jonathan Taylor Thomas almost the same as I was Leo DiCaprio. Am I correct in that there was a sliding doors moment that could have shifted in Jonathan Taylor Thomas's way?
No, it's true. It's true. I mean, I had him pushed.
You had a poster.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know that I had a poster. That might be a little far, but I definitely watched some Home Improvement. It was certainly one of the most popular shows at the time. I don't know. People are like, why the fuck are they talking about this right now?
Where's Rusty?
Yeah, look, Jonathan Taylor Thomas, not Jonathan Taylor. Let's stay on the actor for a minute. Was a teen heartthrob. Okay, he was. I've seen all the movies. What was the one with him and what's his Man of the House or whatever?
Like Homeward Bound, but not.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I watched VHSs and he'd be on every single pre-movie.
He was the go-to. He was definitely the it boy.
Jonathan Taylor Thomas.
Is the proper verbiage? I don't know.
Ryan, I'm pushing 40 one of these years, and I'm just so far removed from what's going on. I don't know what's cool anymore. All right, it's like 97 out, and I'm wearing a beanie. All right, I'm very attached from everything. But the topic at hand, if I can bring us back for a minute, when I look ahead to 2021, assuming everybody's healthy and everything shakes out, realistically, this is how I think you could see the top 5 going. I think Christian McCaffrey stays at number 1 for me. I think he's going to stay there at number 1. I think Barkley's going to continue to be at number 2, but there's going to start to be a conversation because I think Jonathan Taylor moves to number 3, And right here is where I think you see the Ezekiel Elliott, Jacobs, Kamara, CEH kind of take your pick right there. But I think Elliott stays about number 4. And then it's Jacobs, CEH, Kamara, Cook, all kind of in that same group, because I don't know what happens there at 6, 7, 8.
Now here's the problem, and we ran into this with wide receivers around 2016, or I'd say more 2014 to 2016. And I've talked about this, I swear, a lot of times, but I'm going to rehash this because we are in a very inflated running back market right now. And it was basically the exact opposite 2014 to 2016. We had AJ Green, we had Calvin Johnson, we had, Dez Bryant, Antonio Brown, Demaryius Thomas. Like, we had monsters. And then Josh Gordon, of course, had that apex season that was like stupid, and he was going 101 in startups. So we had 10 guys that would be wide receiver 1 right now. We really did. We had at least 8 guys that would all be consensus the guy right now. Dez Bryant was catching 12 to 16 receiving touchdowns a year, and he was like the 105 in startups. It was insane. And now we're at that point with running backs. It's the total exact opposite. And unfortunately, I don't want to be that guy. Injuries are coming. This 2017 class is now 4 years into things. We've already started to see it. And we've seen, the Marlon Macks, the Jordan Howards of the world all kind of start to fall off. And now we're going to start to see some of these big names get cut off the board, just like we did. We don't know who they're going to be, but we do know what's going to happen. We did not foresee AJ Green all of a sudden not being able to play anymore, and that was 3 years ago. We did not foresee Demaryius Thomas and Dez Bryant just being gone. And that's going to happen with these running backs. I'm sorry to inform everyone.
Let me make this case for a minute, because I've talked about this point of view on a lot of episodes. When we fast forward to 2021 and we talk about the potential for a 17-game season, I think that brings a lot into account when we talk about the usage of backup running backs and sort of keeping guys fresh. I think these guys that are ultra high volume, like Barkley was, like Christian McCaffrey was, I think these guys are going to get some of that workload reduced, and I think they're going to start to try to manage reps more to make sure that these teams that are competitive find themselves with their talented players going deeper into the season. And I think that might help alleviate some of the injuries that we're seeing now. I mean, we all knew that it was just a matter of time before Christian McCaffrey got hurt. I mean, he was playing on borrowed time. You cannot touch the ball that much, be his size, constantly evading tacklers, and never get injured. It's just not realistic. Where guys like Josh Jacobs, he looks like he's built to run through this. But then again, nobody actually is built to deal with this. So I think that 2021 could shake a lot of things up. But of course, guys like Jonathan Taylor that are not even 22 years old right now, Jonathan Taylor Thomas that are not even 22 years old right now, those guys are going to naturally bump up higher in the rankings just because they're younger. They've got more tread on the tires. He's got this incredible offensive line. It's the reason why if Clyde Edwards-Helaire hits his ceiling, you love him so much, because he's going to be more of a slippery player. He's not going to get the volume rushing opportunity, but we expect the pass catching to be there, and that's what kept guys like Eckler valuable. That's what's making Aaron Jones valuable. It's just in a lot of these cases. So guys like Cook, guys like Elliott, I expect backup runners to assume a lot more of a workload. And I've got an article that's coming out about Saquon Barkley, and I'm actually concerned about what the New York Giants decide to do with him in this same mentality. Entering 2021, he missed the last 3 games of 2019. He's now out for the year in 2020. So there's questions about the backup running back position in New York. And why do you want to put a plotter or an average running back behind these guys? With the largest free agent class we've seen in many years, plus rookie running backs coming in, somebody's going to inevitably land in a spot behind one of these talented running backs, and they're going to cede some of that workload. At least that's my thoughts, Russ.
Absolutely. I totally agree. We're so inflated, and we've already seen this with Leonard Fournette. Went to a place where the Buccaneers just drafted Ronald Jones 2 years ago in the second round. Kerryon Johnson, the Lions have already drafted another second round running back behind him. And there's more guys coming next year. Chuba Hubbard, Travis Etienne, Najee Harris. These guys are all, it's going to be hard for rookies to emerge in year one with how, bloated this running back landscape is. We have Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb in the same backfield right now. That is ridiculous to have that much talent, in a backup running back. So it is already happening, and it's only going to keep getting worse. And then we have the Jets plotting Frank Gore 20 times a game. So what a world.
I don't want to jump. I'm not by any means taking the steering wheel here, Nate, but one player that you mentioned, not in the top 5, top 6 context, but Aaron Jones. What Aaron Jones did last week, I think, is, obviously a huge week, 45-point, number 1 running back week, just ridiculous performance, 3 touchdowns, 236 yards, the whole shebang. He's a player that I don't know if overlooked is the right word in dynasty senses, but I'm curious, guys, age 25, almost 26, where does he slot in? I guess a lot of the concern with Jones was just being tethered to Aaron Rodgers and what did the Packers look like without Rodgers? Rodgers has looked really good through 2 games. Is he, along for a longer ride than a lot of us maybe initially projected? There was all the talk about they drafted, Jordan Love. They hate Rodgers. Rodgers is looking good. If he stays healthy, how long does he play? I imagine that only helps Aaron Jones' volume. Maybe I'm a bit higher on Jones, but I guess the question for you guys, how high for Aaron Jones, I guess going forward?
So, all right, I'll jump on this one. So here's my take on Aaron Jones. We've talked about this before too. Aaron Jones would be ranked a lot higher if the Green Bay Packers had extended him. It's the reason why Aaron Jones was going so much later in dynasty startups than Austin Eckler, than Derrick Henry, than Kenyon Drake, than name a running back. He was falling behind all of these players. And we look at him this year, and he's even more efficient this year than he was last year, which is shocking because last year he had a 62.6% snap share. This year in 2020, he's averaging almost 10 more points per game, 49.6% snap share. It's insanity how efficient this guy actually is. I think the biggest gap for him is the contract extension, because in the back of people's minds, we've seen A.J. Dillon get drafted to Green Bay. They're thinking, what if Aaron Jones goes to the Jets? Is he as good if he's playing in New York as he is in Green Bay? I think he's talented, but I think the answer is no. And for me, a contract extension would be the big changing factor.
Well, number one, shout out to Matt Patricia, because he saw Devontae Adams had 41 PPR fantasy points in week 1, and he said, "Not this week, buddy." And he's like, "Run defense? We don't need anyone to stop Aaron Jones."
We're not going to stop Aaron Jones. It was
a nightmare. What were they doing? They didn't try to stop the run. So that's a whole different conversation. Shout out Matt Patricia. But I'd like to take us back to 2015. A young Russell Clay tweeting into the wilderness about Aaron Jones and about his efficiency at UTEP. And then out of nowhere, a man mentions him. It's Aaron Jones, gives Russ Clay a follow, and that's how it goes from there. And then he went in the 5th round of the NFL draft, and I've been rooting against him ever since. So how about that?
I mean, he's hyper talented. The efficiency is so crazy though.
Yeah.
There are few running backs that are producing like Aaron Jones is on this little amount of volume. Like you said, they didn't stop the run at all. The guy had almost 170 rush yards on 18 attempts. That was 9.3 yards per attempt. It's ridiculous. So, Ryan, I'm curious what you think here in terms of your rank, but I struggle to move Aaron Jones ahead of the guys that I personally kind of mentioned in the front there, despite the fact that he's been relatively durable. He's high volume in this offense. The efficiency is there. But the question to you is the contract the reason, or is there another reason why Aaron Jones is kind of being underappreciated?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think for dynasty purposes, you want that security, and I imagine we're going to see it for a lot of gamers that now that Kamara is locked up, now that Cook's locked up. I'm curious with Kamara, especially because we've seen Drew Brees through 2 games look not very good. So that, I mean, that story is going to come to a close very, very quickly, and that was kind of the holdup with a lot of the Kamara stockholders was what happens post Breeze, and now with the contract, I'm curious to see how many kind of throw that out the window and just figure he's paid, he's locked in, he's talented, we're gonna run with it regardless. I guess the story could be somewhat similar for Aaron Jones. Aaron Rodgers hasn't hit that cliff. We don't think yet. He's not playing like a Drew Brees right now. So yeah, I mean, I think to answer your question, having a contract would certainly help things along. I'm always going to be a little bit higher than consensus on someone like Aaron Jones. I'm just such a believer in the talent. We saw the ridiculous sideline grab going up, Moss and a defender last week, and he just does everything so well. His profile is so well rounded. He's kind of Josh Jacobs-esque, maybe not obviously as big, as much of a bully, but just does everything so well. And yeah, I think you pay him, you show that commitment long term, and he's going to certainly jump up boards.
Drew Brees he's entering that age where even the guys running in the YMCA basketball games, they're starting to think they're really only shooting corner jumpers. They're not really rebounding anymore. They're kind of just setting picks.
Rough
he's entering that range where it's bad out there.
It's not good. And, over these 2 games so far, Kamara's finished as the RB8 and the RB2. The question is, with a more dangerous passer back there, if it's Winston, does this change?
That's what we want.
And, I was watching that game the other night. Yeah, Drew Brees doesn't look like himself anymore. And admittedly, Michael Thomas hasn't been on the field. That's a big difference as well.
Fair.
But I wonder if Kamara really will lose a step, because what's special about his game is his ability to find openings as a pass catcher, and I don't think that's going to change. And as a runner, he's so physical and he's elusive, and I think that ability that he has is going to carry over probably to the next quarterback. And there may be, even on my part, I may be overestimating the value of Drew Brees. I think the tendencies of Drew Brees are what will be missed, but I don't know that Drew Brees, the passer, is necessarily the reason why Kamara won't make it. If that makes sense. It's the reason why we loved Phillip Rivers for any running back out of his backfield, right, versus what's going on now. So, maybe I'm too harsh on Kamara looking ahead to the future without Drew Brees, but at the same time, it's hard not to tether the two. Am I wrong?
Nate, can I just say your camera is looking dapper tonight.
Thanks, man.
Well done.
Thanks. Well, to be fair, Russ, you're actually seeing my other camera now. You're actually seeing, are you seeing this one right here? Yeah, that's not even the good one, bro. That's the backup camera. And speaking of backup cameras,
that's the placebo.
Can we talk about backup running backs? I'm glad that you helped me switch to this. That's my backup camera. Let's talk about backup running backs.
This is the bridge builder, man.
This is right here. So Ryan, we're talking about backup running backs, particularly in season long. Who is the handcuff to own?
I'm gonna be, a little aggressive with the Jerick McKinnon storyline. Everyone knows the story. Got paid, has been dinged up back to back. Now apparently healthy, and the dominoes have fallen his way. With Mostert getting hurt, the Coleman injury is worse than we thought. The only issue for McKinnon is everyone else seems to be hurt in San Francisco as well, and there's Jeffrey Wilson hanging over his shoulder as well. So for me, I'm very interested, and I'm personally rooting for the McKinnon storyline and for him just to smash. I'm also curious about the situation in Carolina, given Mike Davis. We talked about McCaffrey's injury, but do we see Curtis Samuel switching to a more full-time running back role, like we saw him start out at Ohio State as well? So I'm not sure that these are necessarily handcuffs to own, but these are situations that I'm probably the most invested in.
I saw someone tweeting about Curtis Samuel potentially shifting to running back today, and I just imagining him taking between the tackle snaps is my worst nightmare. I want to protect my man Curtis, and he would be a great running back. That's not my thing. I just, having watched him the last couple years, I'm very concerned about my man. Him and Parris Campbell, I've been caping up for these guys, and they just keep dropping like flies, and I'm so sad about it. But I'd say easily my number one handcuff is Chase Edmonds. If anything happens to Kenyon Drake, that system is going to, like, I think Chase Edmonds could be the RB1 if he's getting featured touches in that backfield. Kyler Murray is stupid good. Like, it's insane, and everything's wide open. Like, I've watched the Cardinals really closely the last couple weeks, particularly against Washington in that defensive front. They embarrassed them, and I think Washington has the best front four in the league. And Kyler Murray he's so good at not getting tackled. It's like he knows when to get down, he knows when to get out of bounds, and defenses are terrified of him now. It's just all wide open. So
someone said that Kyler Murray is Allen Iverson, and I've never loved a cross sport parallel more than that, and I can't unsee that. And it's just dude, he had the ridiculous like stutter step hesitation for a touchdown that got called back last week. That dude, I watched that shit on loop. Must have been 42 times. So good.
Kyler's incredible. Russ, I gotta say this though, as somebody who has beaten the living fuck out of the Chase Edmonds pinata till candy spilled out of his ass, I've got to tell you that I've fought this tooth and nail the whole way, and I know that we heard Cliff Kingsbury talk about the fact that Chase Edmonds could be a starting running back. He loves all of his potential, but let me point out the fact that after 2 weeks, Kenyon Drake has out-touched him 40-15. Okay, so there is a huge discrepancy here. Now, I agree that Chase Edmonds... handcuffed. Now, I agree that he's talented, but look at what Tony Pollard did with Ezekiel Elliott last year, over 100 touches as a backup. Mm-hmm. To me, that's my favorite overall backup, but the number one backup in the whole league is Kareem Hunt. Am I wrong? I mean, clearly the best backup in the league, but that doesn't count. The point is, I like Chase Edmonds. I would prefer Tony Pollard because I think any injury to Zeke, we've seen what Pollard can be. And that's a guy that I just want to own anyways. For my whole crazy theory about 2021 and the idea that they're going to spread touches, Tony Pollard is one of the backs that I want to own in this offense that is so high octane. I mean, they've got the best three receivers in the league at this point. Unfortunately, lose the tight end that everybody was hoping was going to emerge, and then the next tight end emerged. It doesn't matter in Dallas, but we love Dak. And I think Tony Pollard is certainly the backup to own. But with that being said, I think Damien Harris is a guy that people need to get back on board with. I kind of fought against it because I thought that Sony Michel's value was so nice entering this season. Then he had the Liz Frank injury. And now Damien Harris is going to be back at some point, and Sony Michel hasn't been running well, and we haven't seen Damien Harris, but we've seen Michel, and he hasn't been good. So that's one of those still sort of under-the-radar names that people could stash.
I just want to say, you brought up the Patriots. N'Keal Harry has the ball skills and displayed them in week 2 and like made some really fantastic catches. But what the heck is going on after the catch? I mean, I might be one of the biggest N'Keal Harry fans there is. He looks slow, and I'm blown away because I know people thought he looked slow at Arizona State. The dude has a 90th percentile speed score. Like, he's fast, and he was a great like punt returner and kick returner. And can you guys explain this to me, because I'm lost?
Now he has been banged up a bit since being in the league, so maybe there's some weird carryover stuff there. I'm still excited just to see a 12 target game.
Sure.
And it's not, I don't believe it's on the show sheet here, but I saw someone today, and I don't know who tweeted it, but someone said, imagine Visca Chenault getting a 12 target game. Right now, boys, we would be, all three of us might be some sort of nude on the show right now. But speaking about it, just we'll keep it to Harry, man. I'm excited that Cam certainly has some sort of trust in him, at least early on here. But I guess to Rusty's point, the lack of explosiveness, breakaway ability, after the catch ability, that probably will be a concern moving forward. And it's interesting because this all kind of comes full circle, right? That was the question about him. His athletic profile was the big hang up for a lot of people. To Rusty's point, the numbers that we got say otherwise, but I guess the film kind of dictates something else. So I guess there is probably some level of concern there. But man, I'm gonna be quietly caving up for Harry as long as possible.
I mean, nothing is out of the realm of potential at this point entering this season, where it's not a coincidence that all of these players have gotten hurt in a season where we had no offseason, where relatively nobody was able to train. There was no preseason games. I mean, it's not a surprise to see more superstars go down than ever before, because we said, hey, take your foot off the gas, just relax, do your own thing. Maybe do the Suzanne Summers Thigh Master, just work out at home. It's okay. You'll be back. Okay, first game, need you to go 100%. Boom, ACL tear. Boom, fucking high ankle sprain. It's over for all these guys. And maybe N'Keal Harry just hasn't really hit stride yet. He's coming off of a first year where nothing really happened. Now we're entering an off season where nobody was able to train, and maybe he's just getting his rhythm back. Maybe he looks different mid-season. Yes, Russ.
And hey, there's a lot of 2015 Davante Adams tweets out there that haven't been deleted yet. Let's remember, Davante Adams year 2 looked like the slowest, worst. He was being propped as the worst wide receiver in the NFL. There are those tweets out there. They're probably deleted now, but Rusty Clay remembers because I was buying a Dynasty the entire time. And again, we're going to be talking about someone later in this show on the Tennessee Titans, but give these young first-round picks time to develop, guys.
No, I agree, Russ. And what's going to happen here with N'Keal Harry, I mean, we're already seeing the evolution of it. That game that he had the other night, 12 targets, 8 catches, 72 yards. That was a
Clutch catches, too.
What's that?
Clutch catches,
They were,
too.
And that's a great start for N'Keal Harry after coming off of even the first week, 5 catches for 39. We're seeing him make plays on the field, again, with a quarterback he's never played with, in a system that he's really just being integrated into. I mean, we've talked about it. New England is one of the most difficult places for a wide receiver to play. It's where the grittiest guys, the Wes Welkers, the Julian Edelmans, these guys rose, the Jacoby Meyer last year, right? It's a difficult spot to succeed. How many guys in New England were supposed to be the guy? Let's go through the list, right? Kimbrel Tompkins was supposed to be the guy. Was it Maurice Harris was supposed to be the guy? I mean,
Chad Johnson.
I mean, listen, we could
Aaron Dobson.
The list is so long in New England. It's not a surprise to see a guy struggling. And again, with Cam Newton, who isn't notoriously the most accurate passer, and is a guy probably as a wide receiver that's hard to figure out because you don't know if he's going to be mobile, where he's going to be in the pocket at the time that he throws. I mean, Cam can do a lot of different things, so it's hard to get used to a guy like that when you've had plodding, statuesque, gargoyle Tom Brady back there who moves nowhere and throws a fucking laser to the centimeter where you're supposed to be, and when you're not there, you get your ass chewed on the sidelines. So it's just very different. So to Russ's point, we should go dig up some of those Davante Adams tweets. We really should, because
I don't want to.
That would be a fun exercise.
He was free. He was free for a while in fantasy leagues.
No, like, trust me, guys. In 2015, 2016 offseason, he was 12th, 14th round of startups.
Yeah,
it was that crazy.
He was literally free, Russ. Now, I'll tell you who's not free, despite the injuries. Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey. Now, let's talk about dynasty and selling these players. I know these guys for the past few years have been coveted. These guys, you can't sell them. There's no amount of money on the planet that you could push my direction in dynasty that would make me trade one of these two players. But they're both pushing. Saquon will be 24 next year. McCaffrey, a little older than him. Are you trading either of these guys, and what would it take to move them?
Rusty, I want to add a little more context here too, because this kind of ties back to what you were saying earlier about guys like Jonathan Taylor Thomas rising up, guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire rising up, questions about Josh Jacobs, how high for him. We don't have to talk about Aaron Jones again, but this all kind of ties back to there's players that seemingly are going to get pushed up the board if they haven't already. And now I imagine there's probably not a lot of people selling either of these players, Barkley and McCaffrey, McCaffrey, but I have seen some crazy. So maybe there are. I have seen a lot of crazy talk. After the injury, people maybe overreacting or jumping the gun as far as what these injuries are. So maybe it is kind of crazy out there.
I couldn't be slamming that buy button harder right now. Could not. I'll give you more than you want. Like I have not had either of those guys in my dynasty, any of my leagues. I got my first share last night, going shopping for more. I'm trying to buy up all of them in all my leagues, and I will potentially submarine this season to get both. And because you know what happens in 3 months, fellas? You know who's the 101 and 102 in startups? Them. If you're a contender right now and you're looking at your running back spot and you're saying, I don't have much depth behind this, see how the next couple weeks go, and potentially, I'm not saying don't fight, but you don't want to give someone Saquon Barkley for 75 cents on the dollar. Because then you're going to look at that team in 3 months and say, shit, they have Saquon, McCaffrey, and Jonathan Taylor and
Thomas.
and Dobbins, and they're going to run this league for the next 3 years. And I get the argument that 2020 is always the most valuable year in Dynasty, or the current year is, but these guys, there's nobody like them. I mean, I love Jonathan Taylor. He's not quite Saquon.
So are people, by your estimation, Russie, are people overreacting to the injury news, or what is suddenly causing people to wake up and want to offload these type of caliber players?
Well, it always happens, just not with Saquon Barkley. Every year when guys go on ARB, people are willing to trade them to contend this year. It's just, this never happened to Calvin Johnson in his prime. This never happened to all those wide receivers in their prime. So I don't really have any experience with this. Adrian Peterson's the last one I can think of where an Apex 101 in startups just was gone for the season. And I don't remember people selling him. So this is a little bit feels like the inflated running back market is kind of taking hold here. And McCaffrey and Saquon are not. It's making the dynasty rankings closer that Saquon's out for the year, but 3 months from now, he's my clear 101 still. So
yeah, and
I don't know.
I think that doesn't change. That's kind of my theory too. I think that Christian McCaffrey and Saquon remain in that top three regardless of what happens. But I think the problem with Saquon for people, and this might be part of the reason why they're attempting to sell him right now. Again, final 3 games of last year, injured. Then he misses the rest of this season. And the 2 games that he played this year, again, admittedly, tough games. Offensive line wasn't blocking well. Averaged a half a yard the first game. 4 for 28 in the second game. Gets hurt, and you're like, did he lose a step? Does he look worse? The people that can't rationalize away truthfully what happened. And I think you start to pair all that together with the fact that there's hype on Dobbins, there's hype on CEH, there's hype on Taylor, and you realize that you're holding this $10,000 poker chip. You're holding on to this thing and you're like, I could break him for CEH and whatever. I could break him for, right, John Dobbins and so-and-so. You're realizing that you want to compete and you're concerned about what the future is for Barkley, even though anybody that's astute enough to realize it knows that Saquon Barkley is going to fucking smash next year and the year after until he's 29. He's going to be Adrian Peterson. He's going to age into the sunset. He's going to be fucking Frank Gore at 37, still running, 149 times in a season. So there's 7 years of Barkley left out there, potentially. Who knows? There's injuries. But the reality is there's a lot more Saquon Barkley left. But I think people can't get over the fact that if they have him, just like they have Christian McCaffrey, they're like, how close to the sun can I fly? They think, am I going to get burned? Are they going to bring in competition? Is he going to get hurt again? And the guys that have owned Saquon have been hurt by it when they needed him most last year. And this year, if you own Saquon, you were leaning on him and you lost him.
You made a great point here, and I will say if you're gonna trade him or McCaffrey, if you can package it, if you can get like multiple future firsts and a win now running back, then yeah, like you could talk me into that type of trade. If you can get Derrick Henry and a future first and something else pretty good, like I'd start to think about that, and you might be able to get that, or Joe Mixon plus 2 future firsts or something like that. Like, yeah, like you can fire away with that. I've seen stuff like that happen, and I'm game for that. My devil's advocate here would be Saquon had 2,000 yards from scrimmage in his rookie season, and guys don't do that unless I'm not going to use the word generational because I'm going to get quote tweeted and made fun of for being a loser. But he's basically Bo Jackson, and however long he's in the league, I am going to have full trust in him.
Dude, you didn't want to go down the generational road, but you tossed out a Bo Jackson comparison.
So
with
a
that.
3 generation. He's an every 3 generations guy. Yeah.
Fair.
I mean,
yes.
You could dig back through his profile, and a lot of people are going to forget. Like you said, Russ, his rookie year, he had 121 pass targets. He had 91 receptions as a rookie in the league. So people are quick to forget sort of what he's done. And again, this is a guy that's not even 24 years old yet. He's still so young. He's still so young. I mean, Keyshawn Vaughn is 23 and a half already, I think. I mean, think about that. They're the same age. I'm pretty sure they're the same age. So the point is that Saquon is just so hyper young and so talented.
And there's nobody in college football right now within the same stratosphere.
Not even close.
It's not even, there's nobody even close to him.
I suggested, I had a patron hit me up, and he really wanted to go after Barkley, and so he showed me his roster. And I thought one guy that's a really interesting player to try to trade right now is Kareem Hunt, because I think Kareem Hunt is at like a value peak considering his situation, considering the extension he signed. If you compare Kareem Hunt and picks or Kareem Hunt and players and sort of sell on that high, the guy that lost Barkley might think, A, I'm getting a very competitive player to fill my running back needs, and I'm getting picks, with it. I'm not selling Barkley. I would struggle to sell Barkley, just like I would struggle to sell Christian McCaffrey. But, well, I mean, what do you do? Times are tough. Guys want to compete. We're only 3 weeks into the season. You're telling me it's over for me?
Jeffrey Wilson, baby, RB2, let's go.
What are you supposed to do, right? Okay, so Russ, hard times have fallen on owners that own McCaffrey, that own Barkley, because they're injured, and we're not going to get Barkley back, and we don't know how soon we're going to get McCaffrey back. Yet Joe Mixon is not injured, but he also hasn't been built up to the player that we hoped he was going to be entering 2020. Russ, what are your thoughts on Joe Mixon and this new Bengals offense?
This is what you get with running backs sometimes. You just got to ride it out. We know he's talented. We've seen it before. He has a horrible offensive line, but once the Bengals start to get 0-4, 2-7, those pass catching 30-17 in the fourth quarter type game flows are going to start heading his way. Joe Burrow's a very good quarterback. Please, Lord, let him stay healthy. I'm a little worried about that right now, but Mixon's going to be fine. I mean, Gio Bernard's annoying, and you're not going to get, an RB1 overall season from Mixon, but like, again, what we're talking about, all these guys are already out multiple weeks at a time. You can still set and forget Mixon, and you're going to get 12 to 20 PPR points a game. And I mean, we've already seen it. We know he's good. So I have no long-term concerns there.
Yeah, he's top 10 in opportunity share, top 10 in carries, top 10 in weighted opportunity. The problem is the efficiency and production just hasn't lined up yet. There was a stat, PFF tweeted out that Mixon was hit at or behind the line of scrimmage on 50% of his rush attempts in week 2. There's obviously an offensive line issue. No idea why Gio Bernard, as much as that team likes Gio Bernard, clearly was getting the goal line work, and obviously he's going to be there, to Rusty's point, to just siphon the pass game work here and there. So there's things to contend with, but man, there's just so much talent. And I had to shoehorn a Mixon question here because, much like Aaron Jones, between Jones and Mixon, I'm always going to kind of be above consensus on them. I just think there's so much. We've seen so much. There's so much still to give. And those are the players that I'm perfectly fine, kind of to Rusty's point, just riding it out.
And think about this for a second. I got to hit you with the stat here. Number one, to Russ's point, Cincinnati ranks bottom 6 in adjusted line yards per attempt. They fucking stink once again, and it's problematic for
Nate. You were so smart there. Like you were gonna go on. That was like a PFF-esque like
I wanted to
statistical throwdown right there. And then you end it with and they fucking suck.
I'm always incredible. Russ. I'm always going to regress to the mean.
Would listen again.
There's just nothing I can do. So, but let me just say this. So we know the offensive line is no good. Mixon in this game, in the second quarter, opens it up with a 13-yard catch, a 4-yard catch, a 5-yard catch, and then an 18-yard catch. And then get this. You're going to fucking laugh when you hear this one. He doesn't get another target from that point on in the game. But Gio Bernard gets 7 targets, which is 1 more than Joe Mixon has on the whole season. He had more targets in the second half of the game that Joe Mixon's had in 2 full football games. What the fuck is going on in Cincinnati?
Yeah, Zach Taylor might also be, I mean, as good as Burrow is and as good as those pieces, there's been some questionable coaching and play calling. And this is, I would imagine, a perfect example of that. So Zach Taylor might not be it, but I'm content letting that ride out as well. But seeing again, I know Cincinnati loves Gio. He is that guy for him. Always has been. He's got the fucking mustache this year, boys. They're gonna gravitate towards that. But it's just, there's no reason to look at Joe Mixon and say, nah, we're gonna lean on Gio here.
I'll tell you what, Sully football has been. He's really harping on that tweet of the name a better 5 receiver set, and he's
really beating up Joe. He's really beating up Joe Goodberry. I don't know why. Sully does this thing where he just hooks onto something, just doesn't ever let go. It sucks.
It was a ridiculous tweet, but so we can all agree Zach Taylor, Brian Callahan need to permanently glue fucking clown noses to their face because this is absurd. They just signed Mixon to this $48 million extension. No big deal.
Use him. Throw to him.
No big deal. Don't use him. Whatever. I mean, Gio Bernard, not as dynamic as he once was back when he wasn't dynamic. So that's great. I'm glad we've continued to perpetuate the fucking narrative of the Sasquatch. Let's talk about Leonard Fournette. I don't want to talk about goddamn Gio Bernard anymore. I feel sick to my stomach. Just don't feel good right now. Let's talk about Leonard Fournette. Russ. Listen, I need confirmation bias. I need you to wash the pleasantries over me right now. Please say kind things about Leonard Fournette or get off the show.
We're gonna call it early.
Okay. Well, amazing speed score.
All right.
Very, very prolific
it's a good start.
at LSU.
Yes, good start.
And a fantastic rookie season with the Jaguars. They almost made it to the Super Bowl. There you go.
Those are 2 or 3 nice things to say.
Okay, keep going. Now be honest, Russ.
Has he hit or exceeded expectations?
We have seen what he's always been, and on the good side of things, he's just a problem in the open field. He's not quite Derrick Henry, but he is kind of like Derrick Henry in the open field. When a corner sees him kind of rumbling down, they're like, I'm going to slow up on this one. I don't need to. I'm already getting paid. I don't need to deal with this. So Carolina, obviously a weak run defense, but the bigger problem for Ronald Jones is that he hasn't really taken the full opportunity with these touches. He hasn't made any real big splash plays. He did have a nice touchdown run, but this is looking like Fournette's going to be shoving him in a locker very soon, and it's going to be 20 touches a game for Fournette. And I think that was inevitable. And through no fault of Ronald Jones, Ronald Jones is a fine NFL running back at this point.
Stinks, dude. Ronald Jones stinks.
He's fine. He's like he's an average NFL running back with mediocre hands. So probably not very good. Between the tackles, he's pretty good. But at the end of the day, I mean, I've always been a Fournette guy, and if you're going to give him 20 between the tackles runs every week, he's going to be a great fantasy running back. So, yeah, I like him.
I'm I'm
And
dug
great
in.
job, Nate. And great job, Nate. You were on this the whole time. Shout out
really
to you.
was.
And you're
He
really
really
smart.
was.
And I love you. And I'm really proud of you. And
I
you're
just
awesome.
want to say it just feels so good. I know I don't have the Fournette doll.
I was gonna say the bobblehead, man. You
I
need
don't
it.
have it. We fought so many wars on here. I continually was beaten in the head with a wiffle ball bat by every guest. It was my last question to every guest before they left, and they never had anything nice to say. They never had anything nice to say. Ryan, please take the floor on Leonard Fournette.
No, I am. I've been, as you know, have had the pleasure of being on those episodes with the very gracious guests that afforded us their time, and I found myself siding with the guests every single time. As far as I've always been of the mind that Leonard Fournette was largely overrated. Nate has made some very, very logical points, and clearly things are working out for the better for Leonard Fournette here. I will add the only thing that I am kind of happy about the way the situation is played out is that Ronald Jones, boys, is officially he's done. At this point, he has to be done. I know Russie was trying to be very, very PC about it. He added some weight. He's okay between the tackles, this and that. Ronald Jones, for me, just never moved the needle. I know there was a ton of talk this offseason prior to the Leonard Fournette signing, of course, where, this is the season. This is the season for him. Nah, dude, they Bruce Arians signed Fournette. It's over for Ronald Jones in Tampa Bay.
Sidebar, one of the most entertaining things of the week, not even a game, it's the Bruce Arians press conference where he shits on his own team.
Yeah,
Tom Brady was awful last week.
I love that.
Oh,
I love
Bruce,
that.
Chill.
Yeah, Bruce is kind of probably hit that age where he just doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
He's just out here. He's gonna just let his nuts hang, and whatever comes out of his mouth happens.
Wow, that just combination of phrase was holy smokes.
Yeah.
Ryan, listen.
The nuts aren't going to come in his mouth or out of his mouth, but he's got the nuts on the table as he is speaking.
What a hole you've dug. Where are we right now? Listen, Ryan.
I don't know, man. I want to keep talking about nuts.
So listen, so you're deep in a coal mine. The canaries are all dead in there. Turn on your miner's light, and I have a question for you. So I know Russ is the guest on this show, but I want to talk to you before I hear from Russ about Darren Waller because this has to hit home harder for you than anybody else, right?
Yeah. Darren Waller, for those that don't know, Georgia Tech, and I'm sure Russie can speak on like the history of these. There was those few years where it was the Smelters, the Wallers, Calvin Johnson, Demaryius Thomas, like they had some athletes, and Waller was tabbed as that guy coming out. Obviously, Baltimore, things didn't work out. We found out years later there was a lot of off-field stuff, addiction, and he's worked harder, and this has been written up plenty of times out there. Literally one of my favorite stories, and probably my favorite player playing right now, just given what he's battled through and kind of where he's landed and what he's doing right now, watching him shred New Orleans. And it might be one of those games where we look back maybe, a month or so down the road and we just realize, man, the Saints defense in general might be a little bit overrated. I don't know. But Waller was talking about Monday night's game. The Saints had no answer for him. Very, very few teams have the answer for Darren Waller, which has become increasingly more and more clear as the weeks go on here. 6'6", 255. Just if you pull him up on Player Profile, all the little graphs and the bars that we like to look at, they're all very high, boys. He's an athlete. So literally all the boxes get checked for Darren Waller. Battled the stuff off the field, landed in Oakland under John Gruden's very warm wings. And he's flying. And right now, for me, the question is, just like I'm asking tonight, boys, all these players, how high for Darren Waller? I mean, he looks, no cliche, like he does it all, and he does it all very well. He still is Derek Carr's go-to. So I mean, gosh, the volume's there, the athletic profile is there, everything is checked. Russie, is my fandom talking? Is my fandom taking over here? Or, I mean, are you just as smitten as I am?
Well, number one, when you go through the teammate scores, and they've kind of changed the formula around now at Breakout Finder, and they're really smart people. But I I was like the first guy in the prehistoric, like, me and Nate were like, the crawl, like the fish flipping out onto the ground, and now they're
running.
An
evolution comment? Is it Darwinism? Go on.
But when you look at the teammate scores, I mean, Calvin Johnson made Demaryius Thomas redshirt at Georgia Tech. That's how ridiculous their run was. And they never had a quarterback. Not once did they have a competent passing game. But Darren Waller and DeAndre Smelter at Georgia Tech were two very exciting deep threat prospects. Smelter ended up having injuries, and Waller obviously had those off-field issues, but always had the talent. I mean, we all saw it. When you'd see those deep targets go his way, you'd be like, whoa, who is that guy? Why does he only have 20 catches this year? So, it's clear he fought those demons and won, and I'm in. I mean, even for Dynasty, it feels like he's going to be a guy that's around. And I will say, an undrafted or late round tight end, and we're seeing this kind of with Mo Alley Cox right now. A lot of these guys come in as developmental players, and then over the years, teams are like, all right, we're going to put you on the practice squad, but we know you have the talent. And that's what I'm seeing Waller's just come to fruition as a very special guy.
It was cool to see after the huge Monday night, a lot of his, old Ravens teammates came out and were sharing stories about like, this, 83 on the Rage. I remember him, putting up 250 in practice like it was nothing, It's just it's pretty cool to see, again, just the whole picture get painted, everything come full circle for him. Someone that's obviously worked really, really hard. So
let's make this argument for him real quick. Okay. I think for me, looking at the Dynasty landscape, looking at the tight end position, I think 1 and 2 for me are unchanged. Whether you have it Kelsey, whether you have it Kittle, take your pick. It's probably Kittle for a lot of people at this point due to age, due to what he's done for the past 2 years. But can we begin to make an argument now between Waller and Andrews? Is that the 3 and 4? Now, Russ, I see you shaking your head, but let me make my point real quick. Waller's 28 years old, okay? And he's being funneled volume. Andrews is 4 years younger than he is. We saw in 2019, Waller at 20 years old, 117 targets. He's averaging 12 targets a game right now. He outscored Andrews by 14 points in 2019, but he played one more game and had over 20 more targets. Again, Andrews is 4 years younger and appears to be the less dynamic of the two, but the reality is his ADOT is actually twice that of Waller's in terms of his usage in a very efficient Ravens offense. So, is there a conversation to be had, Russ, or is he squarely sitting in the 4-5 slot for you? You're shaking your head. So tell me when to stop. 7, 8, 9, 10? Is he below Eifert?
We gotta. Well, I think there needs to be a Noah Fant conversation with potentially being in that top tier for Dynasty rankings.
But over Waller already, you think?
Yeah.
Oh my God, Nate! Dude, let's do a different show without Russie, man.
Oh my God.
This is fucking...
Wait. No, Noah Fant is 22 and already producing tight end 1 every week.
Now, to be fair, Russ, tight end 1 is not hard to produce. Jason Witten almost finished as a tight end 1 last year.
No, I mean every week he's finishing as a high-end tight end 1.
Listen, he's been great. He had a touchdown last week that saved him. Otherwise, he would have had, 10 points. I agree. You can't take touchdowns away. It's what makes Mark Andrews great, because you could argue that Mark Andrews isn't great without the touchdowns either, because that's been a huge boon to his production. I like Noah Fant. I would agree that he's certainly come up that way. TJ Hawkinson obviously has a lot of upside as well, so I think he's up in that conversation. But specifically, Russ, Darren Waller, just in that tiny window, just the Darren Waller, where exactly, if you had to put the puzzle piece, where do you got him?
Probably 5.
So
Andrews
ahead of Fant, but Fant ahead of Waller. Oh, what? So wait, you've got Fant at 3?
I'm not gonna say that on a podcast. But
well, I don't know what to do then.
I'm smitten. I'm smitten. I've seen some Noah Fant after the catchability that looks like prime Travis Kelce to me. So
I mean,
that's
Ryan. To Russ's point, and I'll let you refute this. Noah Fant is 6 years younger than Darren Waller, a player who has been in the league for 5 years now. And I mean, we remember his Baltimore time. Obviously, a positional change was a big difference here. He looked unguardable last night. He's also not being used as like a deep threat guy, but that doesn't hurt him in terms of PPR and fantasy football. That's just fine. So when you're ranking these guys, I mean, are you Waller temporarily ahead of him? Or, I mean, do you expect Fant to pass Waller sometime soon?
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Rusty. You want to answer something on there?
No, sorry. I was just going to say, if you want to make a rest of season argument for Waller, I'm in. Like, I'm fine with that, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, from a pure dynasty standpoint, Waller again 28 versus Fant's 22, right there. That's a pretty notable gap. I wrote up Noah Fant 2 years ago for Kelly's draft kit, and someone coming out of Iowa, obviously, again going back to the player profiler page, he has all the metrics, all the bars on the bar graph are filled in, boys. I mean, clearly an athlete, has the size, the catch, the after catch ability, everything. All the boxes that Darren Waller checks, and guys like Kittle and Kelsey and Andrews, all the boxes those guys check. Andrews to a lesser extent, obviously athletically, but all the boxes get checked with Noah Fant as well. And age certainly, plays a more prevalent factor in dynasty. That said, and all my fandom aside, I have a hard time moving off of Waller. Someone who still is ascending at his age, still pretty much sits in that, I'm going to call it the wide receiver 1 seat, something that I didn't think really was possible. And we can talk about Bryan Edwards, whether or not it's going to be on this show or another show. But, for the Raiders, for Derek Carr came out today and said it. He just, I don't know the quote verbatim, but basically Derek Carr said he feels different. He plays different when he's targeting Darren Waller, so this is the quarterback saying, this is my guy, kind of like a Tony Gonzalez was, for the offenses that the offense funnels through the tight end in Oakland. Obviously Josh Jacobs gets his run as well, but I mean, this is the quarterback telling you, I have a connection with this guy. I just see that something that kind of gets sustained. I have questions about Denver and kind of what happens when Locke comes back, and now you got Sutton. You're going to pay Sutton. You drafted Jerry Jeudy. You got the backfield. There's a lot more going on in Denver than there is in Las Vegas currently.
That's fair. So in terms of dynasty rankings, we have Travis Kelce. We have Jordan Reed.
What?
We have Mark Andrews, Noah Fant, and then we're slotting in Waller, right?
What's going on?
Is this a bit? Have you been workshopping this on other podcasts before you took it to this show?
Is there a Jordan Reed slant?
I wish I could hit
the
boo button and just the boo. And I'm going to do it in post production. So
that was not as good as I wanted it to be. But you know what? We keep moving forward.
No, it's good, Russ. Sometimes you got to risk it for a little corn. Am I right? Is that the phrase that we've talked about before? Russ and I have both talked. One of these days, one of us is going to do some live stand up. It's coming. We're both big into stand up. Both write it. I'm just a little scared. There is a video out there of me doing stand up randomly. It's on the internet. You can find it. So
put it on Patreon.
I gotta hide it on YouTube. So Russ, let's rotate questions.
Put it on your OnlyFans.
Yeah, let's. Okay, we gotta rotate questions.
He definitely.
So listen, Russ. Let's talk about DJ Chark thus far in this year. As Ryan has it put here, what exactly is going on with Chark? Is it a utilization thing? Is it regression? Is it injuries? What is taking place with him currently in 2020? Because I know a lot of drafters, especially in startups, invested a lot into a player that they thought had wide receiver 1 capability.
Last time I checked, and that was about 3 hours ago, DJ Chark has caught every target that's been thrown his way this year. He's been playing well. He had 80 receiving yards last week. And I saw this a lot with Mike Williams last year, 1,000 receiving yards, and everyone says he sucks now. And this is where evaluating things from a fantasy football lens really lets you down, because yes, he's probably hurt right now. I think that's what's going on in terms of target volume, but he's fine. Like, he's playing well. it's fine. I'm not worried. Obviously, you might not get an apex DJ Chark season this year, and if we're talking dynasty, that's gonna happen. You're just gonna have bad years where the variance doesn't hit players' way. I mean, there are years where elite wide receivers don't score any touchdowns. That's just the way it goes sometimes. And as a dynasty player, you just have to evaluate what's happening on the actual field, not what your PPR fantasy points are telling you, because that will fail you. That gives a lot of false positives on players that are good and a lot of false positives on things that aren't actually happening. So Chark's been playing well. Yes, he might be injured. Yes, the Jaguars are putting up a lot of points and he's not getting huge volume, but I didn't even know this was a thing until I saw it earlier today, and I was like, wait, what? Because that wasn't even on my mind, that he was playing bad. 80 yards in a game is pretty darn good, if you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, it's the chest and back. I guess people, there's talk that's kind of hampering him a little bit. I guess my concern, I bring him up too, because not to say that he's going to overtake him by any means, but someone like Keelan Cole seems to be someone that's getting a lot more involved. Again, we saw him a couple seasons ago, really kind of assert himself, and now took a step back last year. Now again seems to be on the radar of Minshew, who's playing some really good ball through 2 weeks as well. So I don't think Chark, to Rusty's point, is someone that simply falls out of favor. He's broken out. He has the profile and all that. So this is someone that you have to imagine is here to stay. So I guess Chark gets added to the show sheet just as a kind of a note to listeners. I wouldn't, much like Rusty already kind of laid out, I wouldn't be overreacting to a perceived, lack of a box score or whatever like that. But again, I think the injury is something to monitor. And yeah, I think if you just gotta kind of ride it out, which has been kind of the theme with a lot of these players here. Just if they're good, they're talented, we know they're good. Just ride it out. Just be patient.
I gotta shoehorn this in here because I've gone back to it on my site, on Patreon, patreon.com/I'm outraged. I have gone back to writing my Dynasty Buys article, and every week I am now writing one Dynasty Buy player that I'm looking at, and I have a guy who I believe is this year's DJ Chark. He is pretty much unowned in most redraft leagues, and on Dynasty teams, you can basically get him for free. I've drawn all the corollaries. It's all there for you. Go check it out. It's saucy. If you want Chark, he's right there for you, for the taking. Now back to this the chest injury is something to monitor, as you said, but it's a good matchup in Miami, I believe, this week. They're without Byron Jones, so this might be an opportunity if he's healthy to see that production go back up. But to Russ's point, Russ is really good at this. See, Russ is he's very understanding with what it takes at the positions. He gets that not everything comes year one. Then there's ups and downs with these positions, and you can't play scared. And with a guy like Chark, we saw an incredible season last year. And there's no reason to believe it doesn't carry over to this year when Minshew is playing way more efficient than we ever expected him to. So I think good things are coming as well. Injuries are always a factor. So it's really hard to say exactly what the reason is for his play at this point, but we got to put a lot of it on probably the offseason and probably the injury entering this year. But Russ, let's move to the Adonis, the best bod in the draft from a few years ago, the man who makes me proud to be a Seattle Seahawks fan, DK Metcalf. Russ, I know you've got spicy takes on Metcalf. As we start to move through the year and we enter 2021, how high is the ceiling for DK Metcalf? Because I want to say this to you. I did a Patreon podcast and I actually brought you up in it. I mentioned there was a time I was texting with you and I was on the clock in a startup and I had a choice between Julio Jones and Antonio Brown. And I think this was like 1 or 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And you said to me, I go, which one would you pick? And you said to me, which one would you rather guard on a football field? And it took me a minute to think about it, and I thought, well, I would rather guard Antonio Brown, even though he was going to leave me in the dust because of the speed and physicality of Julio Jones. And I think we're seeing that with DK Metcalf, a player that was knocked for his route running, but has since torched the best corner in the league, right?
That sounds like something a Russ Clay, who's had 3 venti iced coffees and has looked through 10, 20, 30 queries in the previous 2 hours. That sounds like something he would say.
You're on a query high.
Oh, and I mean, I agree with that statement. So shout out to him. That play action touchdown, or I don't even know if it was play action, but what he did to Stephon Gilmore, that reminds me of when I would be wearing jeans running around in the yard with my Jack Russell, and he'd grab on to my jeans and I'd just throw, like, I'd
what an analogy.
Throw my jeans up and he'd just fling off and then he'd run back at me. But the point is that he had nothing. He had nothing for DK Metcalf. And that's just foreshadowing of what we're going to see. We saw it in week 1. We're going to see it again this week. I'm all in on him against the Cowboys. I mean, he's got a special quarterback. I have a hard time having him not be my dynasty wide receiver 1 right now. It's just through 20 games, counting that playoff game against the Eagles, this guy is pacing out to be an all-time receiver. He has everything. The only thing holding him back was those injuries in college. And we all talked about this, especially us, shout out us, because we have the teammate score. We have all these other factors. We saw this, like, he had A.J. Brown and Van Jefferson and Evan Ingram on his same college team. Like, that's why he didn't have a huge production score. And then he tested out like a cyborg. And when he did play in college, he was incredible. He was the elite prospect we've been waiting for. It just didn't come to fruition because of that foot injury and that whatever ended his final season. But he was the guy. It just the profile got taken from us because he got injured. So I'm totally done. I think he's at least Andre Johnson-ish, and I'm all in. Like, would you guys rather own anyone in Dynasty?
I mean, again, this is going to be the question this offseason. I mean, if he keeps, if he is the apple of Russie's eye, Seattle Russie's eye, you know what I mean? Like, the sky's the limit, boys. And the question that everyone's talking about post Patriots is if Stephon Gilmore, who widely is considered the league's top corner, if not a top 2 corner, top 3 corner at absolute worst, if he doesn't have an answer for DK Metcalf, who is going to have an answer for DK Metcalf? And I don't think that list is very long. It might not even be populated this time. The only thing I want to add to this conversation before I let Nate, jack off a little bit. This is, there was a picture post game of Julio Jones and DK Metcalf, like, dapping each other up, showing some love, whatever. It was like that picture, boys, of like the guys touching their fingers, that painting, you know what I mean? Like, it was like some religious shit, of, like, they were looking at each other in the mirror or some shit. So this is, I mean, I think the Andre Johnson comparison is there, but I mean, like, this dude is athletic like Julio was, and plays the game to a similar extent like a Julio Jones, and I'm glad that we're seeing it all line up, and it couldn't happen to a better person in that situation with Russell Wilson, who's out there cooking.
Russ cooking, man. Russ is averaging, his touchdown rate is 14.3 right now, and don't tell me that's unsustainable. Ryan, Russ, listen, here's my, as a huge fan of DK Metcalf, I'm a huge fan of DK. Let me just say this about DK. Currently, he's on pace for 112 targets on the year, which would be better than the 100 that he saw last year. Last year, that was the first time a rookie had ever had over 100 targets in a Pete Carroll offense. It was the first time 2 players had over 100 targets in a Pete Carroll offense. You can see the trend moving forward. The point is, it is very difficult in the fantasy football landscape for a player to finish inside the top 10 with so few targets. Basically, what we need from DK Metcalf is more growth in volume. Now, whether that's going to happen in Seattle, that's yet to be determined. He needs to become an 8, 9, 10 target a game guy, because the reality is, unless you're Tyreek Hill, or one of these other like huge play guys, which he has been to his credit. I mean, the past couple games, he's had some monster touchdowns. Unless you're one of these wide receivers, it is very difficult to finish anywhere near the top 10 and not be a 130 plus target guy. So that's my one cautionary tale with DK Metcalf. With that said, he took it to Stephon Gilmore all game. I mean, even when he was just running routes, they were in a war. And tip of the cap to Gilmore. Is there a more like physically brutal player to go against in the league right now? I know Julio Jones would be brutal because his routes are so ridiculous in addition to the size and athleticism. But goddamn, him and DK were fighting all game. And I got respect for both guys. But DK is going to evolve into such a high-end fantasy talent. My only concern is the target share going to be there. Russ, does that concern you at all that DK, as long as Tyler Lockett's in town and as long as Seattle remains this sort of run-centric offense, that he never sort of gets to that 10 target again? I mean, will we ever see DK Metcalf with 160 targets?
Okay, so here's the doppelganger right now. And I think when we have elite quarterbacks, we can see insane wide receiver efficiency. And that's what we have with Russell Wilson. He's always been very efficient. Tyler Lockett's been a top 15, 20 guy the last couple of years. And I mean, he hasn't been a target hog. I mean, he's going to get more targets than Metcalf. But I guess the point I'm heading towards is there was a time, 2011, Aaron Rodgers slinging the rock at Lambeau. I feel like I'm speaking like Ryan right now, and that makes me happy. I'm proud right now. I feel like he's worn off on me enough.
The verbiage is there.
And there was a man named Jordy Nelson who had 1,200 receiving yards and 15 touchdowns on 96 targets. And I'm not saying DK Metcalf's going to do that, but I'm saying DK Metcalf is probably going to do something like that this year. I just, unless they double him, he's 6'4", 230, has amazing ball skills and runs a 4.3. I don't know who can guard him. And again, he brushed Stephon Gilmore off like he was a 5'9", 160-pound future insurance salesman. And
okay,
he's
Russ,
not.
Let me say this. The one way that DK Metcalf gets to the finish line via 120 targets is 12 touchdowns. And that's absolutely not outside the realm of possibility, right? That is 100% inside the realm of possibility. Currently, he's got 2 touchdowns on the year already in 2 games. And when we go back to that vaunted Jordy Nelson season, as you've cited, 96 targets, 15 touchdowns that year. That was really what boosted him. And we do believe that he's going to be the anti-Julio Jones. We do believe that DK Metcalf will catch more touchdowns than Julio Jones does on average. Russ, yes.
So going into last week, I was talking with the fantasy guru guys, Tyler Beaker and Armando Marsal, and I was like, guys, I'm going to go back and watch this Falcons game to see what happened. Is the Falcons secondary really this bad, or did something else happen? And even on the slant routes, I mean, these Falcons corners had no chance. And I sent them some video of these routes, and I'm like, guys, I get the Falcons secondary might be bad. That's not his fault that he cannot stay with that guy. Like, there's nothing you can do on, if he gets inside leverage on you, you're done. So, anyway, that's
No, I'm glad you've exhausted that from the system. Well, I mean, and things are only going to get better if you're a DK Metcalf fan or you're starting him in fantasy, because they're playing Dallas next week. And with that Seahawks secondary being as god-awful as it is, I was looking at them compared to Minnesota. They're giving up almost 150 yards passing a game more than Minnesota, and Minnesota's ranked 4th. It's shocking how bad that secondary has been, despite the fact that they've added Jamal Adams to it. But this has a shootout written all over it, hyper-efficient Russ written all over it. This is going to be a fantasy scoring game. Start all your wide receivers. Start all of them. Start CeeDee, start Gallup, start Cooper. Start every single receiver in this game. It will not let you down. But Russ, so So again, you have
I
DK
don't wanna do
Metcalf
it.
ranked what in 2021 at the wide receiver position? I mean, realistically, is he top 5 for you?
In Dynasty's
Okay.
number 1 right
That
now.
is that's a strong, that's a grown
Yeah.
man ass take, Russ. That's like,
I'm just seeing I've been waiting for this for a decade. We literally haven't had an elite wide receiver prospect in a decade. I'm sorry, guys. And this is it. This is our guy. This is our Andre Johnson. This is our Calvin. This is our Fitzgerald. And yeah,
Russ, I wish I had like a Mother Mary candle that I could light right now. I was do like a candlelight vigil. I was unprepared. I think we should just sort of take a moment of silence for Parris Campbell, once truly elite prospect. Let's just bow our heads here for a minute. Just a moment of silence. You know, just didn't have to be. That's not fair. It didn't have to go out like that. But Russ, it seemed like everything was going Parris's way. Ryan was caping up for him hard as well. This was the year.
I think I saw a tweet out there that someone called him the best wide receiver in the NFL.
Who the fuck tweeted that?
Did you see that?
I didn't get that crazy with it, but I love whoever. I
tweeted that out, but I made it.
I saw that. I wanted to reply to it, and it said only if you were whatever in it. I'm like, why did this guy tag me?
And I tagged no one. Yeah, that was the point.
What a jerk. So Russ, Parris Campbell is hurt, had injuries last year. I mean, you know as well as I do what this path can do to a player's career. What's the realistic expectation for Parris Campbell in his rehab and going into next year?
We've seen this many times, and I've seen this with both prospects I was low on and prospects that I was high on. Like, if you can't get through those first 2 years without hitting IR both times, like, that's a really bad indicator. And he didn't tear anything, so that's good. But this is just about the worst possible scenario. If you ran his career 100 times, like, this is possibly the worst possible way it could have started. So I'm so bummed. And we were going to see him get 6 to 8 targets a week in that Colts offense. And now, I mean, I don't know if they move on from him, but they're certainly going to make other plans next year in case, like, planning on him not being able to stay healthy. So I'm sad, legitimately sad. I feel so bad for him because, you know, this is where you kind of look at the human and just like, damn, he worked so hard to get here. He was in the spot, like, he had it. He was a featured receiver in the NFL and taken away from him. So I'm super bummed.
Yeah, it's just, you know, we hate to see any injury to any player, any position, but when it happens, you know, now so frequently, two years in the league for him and 2 injury-filled seasons, it just sucks, man. You know, it's just poor luck. And, you know, you go back to looking like, I mean, what was he off injured at Ohio? I don't remember any injuries at Ohio State. So it's like you can't even really say he's had this big history. You know, it's just shitty luck, boys. And you know, obviously a player that all 3 of us felt very, very strongly about. One of my favorite moments is when Nate put a fucking spacesuit on at the combine. I was ready to tweet that video out literally every single week this year when Parris Campbell did something fun. So that was also taken away from us, which I'll never forget. No, it's just, you know, in all seriousness, again, it just sucks because the question is, as Rusty kind of alluded to, what does happen next? You know, the Colts, you know, as Nate will tell you better than anybody, they drafted someone in Michael Pittman, you know, and so they are, you know, they were looking ahead as early as last draft in that sense. Maybe with the, you know, the foresight, you know, is Campbell going to have these reoccurring issues? I don't know, but it is it's an unfortunate situation. I hope that Indianapolis kind of gives it one more go around, and I hope things shake out differently. But as Rusty says, I think you look back at the historical trends with these players that, you know, have had this unfortunate injury luck. Things don't necessarily work out for the best in that regard.
Or they come back and they're not quite, they
Same,
don't
yeah.
quite have the same juice because they've just,
and that Yeah, and that was Campbell's game. It was predicated on that juice, on that explosiveness, on that athletic profile.
And it's the confidence in your body, and there's so much psychological stuff that goes on when you get hurt a lot. And what I'm done.
Yeah, I'm gonna start tearing
Russ,
up.
I've got body confidence issues, so let me ask you a question. Also, Michael Pittman, I always like to remind people of this. Michael Pittman was selected with the second pick in the second round. The Colts took him before they took Jonathan Taylor. Okay, Russ. Diontae Johnson, all offseason, all we heard was Pittsburgh's not going to re-sign Juju. Juju's out of sync with Big Ben. Juju's at best the second or third option in this offense, man. And then he kind of looks like the second weapon in the offense right now behind Diontae Johnson, who was number one in target separation in 2019. They brought in Chase Claypool. They've got Eric Ebron. They've got all these weapons. There's so many guys. I'm not going to say too many mouths to feed. Ben will sling it. Russ, is Diontae Johnson the wide receiver one in Pittsburgh? And what is going on with Juju Smith-Schuster?
He had a wide receiver 1 week in week 1, didn't he?
Don't just railroad my take, my lead in. I spiced it for a full minute just for you to
give it to us, man. Rusty, I know you don't want to do this. You're like the last person to answer this question because you just fucking love like the draft pedigree, the profile. Like
And they
Juju,
all have it.
Juju checks literally all those boxes
I'm
as a
not
Corey
doing
Davis
that.
would.
No.
So
Yeah.
you're like the worst person to ask this, which makes you in turn the best person to
You
ask
just
this
turned
question.
me into bitter beer face right now because I don't want to talk about any of this. Diontae Johnson also a 3rd round pick. So we have a situation where we have 4 wide receivers drafted in the top 3 rounds battling for target share right now. Chase Claypool last week with an 84-yard touchdown and looking speedy out there.
He's built.
And I still like James Washington. He's probably going to have to find a new team, but they just have 4 really good receivers right now. And looking like Diontae Johnson's a slot guy. How about that? I hate it, but it's the reality, and sometimes you can't deny the reality. I had to come around on Austin Eckler, had to come around on Adam Thielen, and looking like Diontae is happening. So I guess we just accept that. So
if we're not going to directly answer his potential wide receiver status in Pittsburgh per se, although you've tiptoed around it very, very eloquently, maybe another way to phrase the question is what does this do dynasty ranking wise for Juju? Are you overreacting to 2 games? Are you looking ahead and saying this could be Diontae's job? You know, again, I know you don't want to say one way or the other, but give the people a sense of kind of what you're doing with Juju dynasty ranking wise.
I am going to go to PPR fantasy points right now. I'm going to go sort, and I am going to find Juju Smith-Schuster in the top 30, hopefully. And okay, he is wide receiver 13 right now, and we're going to lock that in. We're going to say he's averaging 18 fantasy points per game, and we're going to avoid answering this question.
Don't worry, Russ. I'll do it for you.
It.
Nate, take
Let me go ahead and get my chest out when I
go.
say this, Russ. Let me just tell you, look, I love Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, this is one of those guys, same thing that happened with Jalen Reagor at TCU. People looked at that down year of production the same way that they did with Juju at USC, and everybody thought that maybe he's not as good as he actually was when he was drafted at the NFL level. Then there was the injury to Big Ben, which derailed everything, and people can't forget what happened in 2018. I mean, that season cannot be forgotten. If you're putting that out of your mind, then you're forgetting what the talent that Juju really is when he's on the open field. Currently, though, they're about neck and neck with snap share on the year. And Diontae Johnson has him out-targeted by about 9 targets on the year in total. So, and the receptions are close. But Diontae Johnson clearly looks like the favored target right now. And maybe that's because Johnson's always open, and who knows what the deal with Juju is, but it seems more and more likely that Juju is not re-signed in Pittsburgh, which is shocking to me because as much as I love DK Metcalf and the vibes that he brings to the city of Seattle, I feel like Juju brings that to Pittsburgh. Like you see these things that he does off the field. You can go to his YouTube account and see the cool stuff that he does. He's just generally a good person. So I find it strange that there is this issue between him and Pittsburgh. He just seems like the perfect fit there. I mean, especially coming off that 2018 season. So maybe it's just a matter of get right. We're coming off a Big Ben injury the year before, a weird offseason. Diontae Johnson had more chemistry with Big Ben entering the year. But as you said, Juju Smith finishes the wide receiver 6 overall in the first week of the year. So it's not like he's really let fantasy owners down. I mean, he's already had a top 10 week in the first 2 weeks. So maybe we need to pump the brakes a little bit. But the question that I really do have is, do you think that he re-signs in Pittsburgh?
Oh, he's going back in, folks.
I'm not
for the third time. He's just digging. He's just digging into he's just breaking my rib cage.
We want you to
have a take.
Just let it
have
out
a take. Have a take. You can hear the delay.
Have a take.
Yeah, okay, whatever.
Oh my God. Wow.
It's not much
Russ,
of a take,
you know
Rusty.
what?
It's not doing
That's
it. That's
actually a pretty solid take. It's actually better than some of the takes that Davis Maddock had. So, okay, let's move on. Look, Russ, we've got an Allen Robinson question on the show sheet, and I'm not even sure how to decipher exactly what this was intended to be read as or what it was supposed to mean. Ryan,
I don't know.
a clerical error
I don't know.
at the bottom of the show
blacked
sheet.
out, I think. Yeah, I blacked out. Mm-hmm.
What do we want, Allen Robinson?
Where do we want Allen Robinson? I don't know if do you want to hang out with him? I don't know what I was going with that. Maybe like if the Bears do the unthinkable and don't give him money, where is there a okay? Here we go. I got it. There is, we've seen AJ Green, one of the more prolific receivers to come out, one of the receivers that, we often, maybe it's just me, but I imagine we've all asked ourselves, AJ Green, had he not been tethered to that Andy Dalton, that offense, where would we be valuing AJ, lifetime wise, AJ Green would have been so far way above and beyond, are we seeing the same story play out with Allen Robinson and just having to be crippled by just brutal quarterback play in Jacksonville, now in Chicago? He's producing fantasy wise in Chicago as he did in Jacksonville as well. But is there a situation, I guess, where I was going with this is if he wasn't in Chicago, is there a spot that makes sense? I imagine the Bears pay him, but if the Bears don't pay him, Russie, just fucking tickle my dick, buddy. What do you think?
I'll tell you what, I'm ready to be done with Alan Lazard and Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I'm ready for them to not be getting targets from Aaron Rodgers anymore. So do with that what you will, but I would love to get Devontae Adams some help in that wide receiver depth chart and get some secondary targets on that team, because I thought it was going to be Jay Sternberger, and it is confirmed not Jay Sternberger season.
It's not going to be Jay Sternberger.
It's not Jay Sternberger at all. And I think that wow, good job, Nate. Thanks, man. So I look at this Allen Robinson situation, and the Bears actually have a lot of people to sign. What's really interesting, and I actually don't think the Bears re-sign Allen Robinson. Here's why. The problem is they paid Nick Foles, and Mitchell Trubisky is playing pretty well himself. Now, Mitchell Trubisky is owed money next year as well, in addition to some other players in this offense. So the question is, can the Chicago Bears, who already don't have a ton of salary cap money, can they afford to actually re-sign Allen Robinson? We've seen Anthony Miller play well last season and part of this season thus far. Is he ready to ascend and be a leader in this offense? I don't know. But the question is whether or not they can afford to pay Allen Robinson this money. I don't know. We've seen Robinson take all of his Bears images off of Instagram. He's pulled all the Bears information off of his Twitter bio. As far as he's concerned, he's not a Chicago Bear. And that's a bold thing to do, considering that social media information travels very fast, and you knew it was going to get around, and it was going to create a tension between him and the organization. I actually don't think he signs back with Chicago, and I don't even know. Maybe he gets traded this year, depending on how the Bears are playing at some point in the year, which might be the most likely scenario. But I don't think Allen Robinson is in Chicago in 2021. Russ, is that a crazy statement?
No, and I guess the point is it doesn't matter who's catching passes right now because their quarterback situation is so horrific that how much of an impact can a wide receiver even make in this offense? It's just dink and dunk. And then, I mean, Allen Robinson's a great receiver, but how much can he average out Mitch Trubisky? He can't. So, yeah, I'm fine with that. I think that's fair to say they're moving on and give him a good quarterback.
I think he's probably going to end up somewhere awful as well. So, Ryan, listen, and you and Russ, to be fair, both of you guys were very high on this wide receiver. And I had a big show take where I went in heavy on him, and I agree with this question. And I want to get you guys' take on it. But when we talk about Calvin Ridley and his ascension in Atlanta over the past 2 seasons, is it fair to say that he is the number 1 wide receiver in that offense?
Russ, do you want to? I don't know if you're more comfortable talking about the Ridley Jones situation than the Diontae Juju situation. I'll let you have first crack at it, and I can kind of wax poetic myself.
God's sakes.
Have a take.
Okay. I have a take here, and that's Julio Jones played most of the snaps last week, but he's dealing with a hamstring injury.
Yeah, the hammy is a legit concern.
After week 1, I'm still pretty positive Julio's the number 1 there. It's just Calvin Ridley is a wide receiver 1 facing second cornerbacks. So that's what's going on right now. And I mean, shout out to Alabama. In his junior year, they had him, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, and Devontae Smith as their starting wide receivers. I can't imagine what their opening week against the Citadel or whoever they're playing. I wonder what their game plan was going into that week.
Don't cry too much.
But no, I don't think it matters though because of the volume. Like I think we could see a scenario where they're both wide receiver 1s this year. That's a pretty hot take. There you go. But I think Ridley can definitely get 10 touchdowns this year. He's already got 4. We've seen the route running. It's not that it's good route running. It's that he's leaving people in the dust. I mean, there's some times where there's literally nobody around him, like within 5-10 yards. So he's got despite the perception, he does have 4.4 speed. So he is pretty athletic for his size and such. And first round pick, I like everything about him, and he's great.
Yeah, he was a player, and Nate and I talked about him a little bit last week and a couple times before, but he was certainly a player for me where I had no problem raising my hand and just saying that I was completely off as far as, his college prospect profile and kind of where I thought he would land and kind of what his impact would be at the next level. Completely off. Turns out he's just super polished as far as route running and just overall ability as a receiver, man. 6'1", 189, just does it all and does it all really well for the Falcons. Number 2 in air yards right now, number 1 in red zone targets. That Falcons offense this year, I was super, super high on Matt Ryan, just spraying it all over the field. And I know Rusty said his 2, wide receiver 1, Julio Ridley take is a hot one, man. I don't think that's too spicy at all, just given what we've seen Matt Ryan do through the first 2 weeks and just his willingness to just let the ball fly. I do think, as Rusty kind of led in with, that hamstring for Julio, something to monitor. We've talked a little bit about injuries this show, but Julio came out and said as much last week where he dropped that touchdown. He basically said straight up that I I can't run the way I want to run given what my hamstring's doing right now. He's going to play through it like he's done in the past, but definitely something to monitor. But man, the Ridley ascension is definitely happening. It's been happening. I had him as my wide receiver 10 entering the season for season long purposes, and that's looking a little bit low to what he's doing through 2 games right now. So I'm very, very excited about Ridley right now. And
let me just say, Russ, I don't think the take is too spicy that they could be 2 top 10 guys. I mean, we've seen Diggs and Thielen finish high together. We've seen Juju and AB do it not too long ago. Right now, Matt Ryan's averaging 45 pass attempts per game. I know there's people out there that are like, that's unsustainable. It's not possible. You can't keep it up. He averaged 41 pass attempts per game last year. So we're not that far removed from that average. He's currently on pace for 720 pass attempts. That's not going to happen. But hear me out on this. The reason that Matt Ryan is throwing as much as he is because this offense can't run the ball for shit. So they're necessarily going to have to lean on the pass a lot more in a lot of shootouts. And I don't know what Todd Gurley is or isn't this year exactly behind what is not a great offensive line. It allowed the 6th most stuffs in 2019. So not a great offensive line to start with, even though they drafted 2 first-round offensive linemen just 2 years ago. Things haven't gotten that much better, but Matt Ryan is slinging it all around the league. They're number 2 in pass attempts this year. Calvin Ridley is number 1 in touchdowns. He's tied for 1st in receiving yards. He's top 5 in targets. He's number 1 in first downs if you play in Scott Fishbowl. So a lot of great things going on for Calvin Ridley this year, and he has volume on his side. You know, the thing about Julio Jones, Russ, I love Julio Jones as much as you love Julio Jones, but Dan Quinn was quoted before week 2 and said that Julio Jones has been dealing with a hamstring injury for a couple of weeks. Russ, we were 1 week into the NFL season when he had been dealing with a hamstring injury for a couple of weeks. Now, I'm no mathematician, but essentially he had a hamstring injury before the season even started, right? So this guy could be hampered by an injury throughout the entire season. And you know as well as I know that even though he's generational, he's almost 32 years old. And at some point, all those parts and pieces of the human body start to give way a little bit. And I realize that he signed that contract and people think that that's like a shield that'll reflect the fire from the dragon of health. But the reality is that he could be caught by the turf monster at any moment. And we're already seeing it with Julio Jones. And I'm not going to be surprised when Calvin Ridley finishes the year with more fantasy points than he does. And I don't think that's crazy, Russ.
Oh, boy. Why are we're taking down Todd Gurley. We're taking down Juju Smith-Schuster. You're just going through murderer's row of all my favorite players and trashing them right now. I will not stand for this. Julio's going to be fine.
Okay, I want to ask you a question,
final.
Russ, because we didn't get to it earlier. Has anybody seen, now we talked about the Christian McCaffrey injury. So when Christian McCaffrey went down, did that also mean that the fantasy counselor was right? Did he get it right? Did he make the right call on Christian McCaffrey letting owners down this year?
I've never seen him be wrong, if we're being quite honest.
Yeah,
I think
that's the right answer.
I think this man's reputation is pretty pristine, if you'd ask me. And what I will say is to all you pencil pushing analysts out there who
call them nerds, call them what they are.
You nerds out there
bunch of dweebs
who make fun of and disparage this man's brand. All I'm going to say to you is you don't get it. You don't get it. This guy is a monster and he's entertaining. And okay, so most of that was joke shtick right there. But what I will say is I actually kind of enjoy, I think he's entertaining. I really do. And I get why he's popular. And for those of you that don't, you need to learn because I get it. I see the vision. I see why it's working for him and he's hilarious. Whether it's intentional or not, this guy is a monster and I approve.
Pete Overzet is a man that wears many hats. He, much like the counselor, is taking this industry by storm. Pete is everywhere. He literally one of the funniest guys doing it. And him bridging the gap between Instagram and Twitter and bringing all of us, the counselor, is one of his finest works to date. The only thing I will add to what Rusty said is that there's a lot of people that clearly miss how this guy has generated over 180,000 followers on Instagram. He speaks to, there is the bubble that we find ourselves in, this fantasy football community is a very small percentage. I see tweets daily about, people reading waiver wire columns and constantly clapping back about, oh, I can't imagine being in the league where so-and-so wasn't drafted and all this stuff. The reality is that we account for a very, very, very small percentage of actual fantasy football gamers. And the counselor is speaking to the larger majority by, questioning who Alec Ingold is, taking Josh Jacobs' touchdown, and telling folks that Christian McCaffrey was always going to be a bust because the counselor had the foresight to know he's going to do a GQ cover spread and all this shit.
While playing Vogue by Madonna in the background.
It's so
Are you
good.
kidding me?
It's so good. He is
Ryan,
he is
I'm
very
glad
good
you
at
brought
what
that
he
up
does.
because
Very good at what he
Russ and
does.
I were texting about this. I think it was last night. And we literally said the same thing. We said, listen, we're in this highly analytical, research-driven world where we want to be accurate. We realize that accuracy is the most important thing, but it's actually a smaller piece of the pie. It's a weird way to think about it. It's like entertainment's the bigger piece of the pie, but it's less valuable than accuracy. But we want to be entertained. And he does speak to this huge group of people. Like I was saying to Russ, he's the guy that's like, start this guy versus this defense because they're giving up 5 yards per carry. And none of us would ever say that because we'd be like, holy crap, put some context to it. Like, how's he doing running between the A gap? How's he doing between, we're looking for more depth in it. And the counselor he's just speaking to a much greater audience than any one of us are. And for that reason, he's taking off. And one more thing that Russ and I talked about the other night was, don't be surprised when this guy's on network TV on some Jim Rome type show,
100%.
high energy.
And Russ Clay is saving it on his DVR and watching it because
every single day, dude.
And this is another thing for those of you trying to get into the industry and trying to build a brand of your own. I'm not saying you have to do this. There are a lot of, people want accuracy, people want good data, but when you're trying to impress other analysts, you're missing a huge part of what's actually going on. It's that, are the people that are listening to you having a good time? Are your people that enjoy your work and are following you, are they enjoying their interactions with you? Are they laughing? Are they having a fun time? Because that's what keeps people coming back. I mean, unfortunately, at this point, a lot of people are good at stats. A lot of people are good at film. A lot of people he casts such a wide net of the casual fan, whereas Russ Clay's doing 2021 college wide receiver rankings and talking about Appalachian State's second string running back. Do you guys see how that's really chunking down your market here? Whereas he's talking about Christian McCaffrey being a bust. Like, if you guys, and I'm assuming a lot of analysts and writers are listening to this podcast because we kind of get into the weeds and you guys kind of get into the weeds, but, try to have fun. Like, he's having fun. You can tell he's having fun. I think people know when you're having fun versus when you're pushing it, So that's my soapbox and I'm getting off it now, but before you send out a tweet knocking the counselor for his brand and how bad it is, recognize this man's probably smoking you. Cause other than like Matthew Berry and the fantasy footballers, He's got the biggest
it's huge, man.
following.
So it's no shock to guys like us that really do. And I know, Russ, you're similar to me. Like, I'm always scouring YouTube and other groups and really looking, analyzing what's working for people. What are they doing? What's successful? Why is this getting clicks? Because the analytics, the data, you can glean a lot of information from that. And for guys like us and Ryan as well that are that are working on building brands, that are trying to sort of, stand out from the herd. Because again, there's a lot of guys that can do numbers, and some guys are very good at it. I love Rich Rebar. That guy is a machine gun of stats.
Machine. And I'm not going to
never
be
in
able
a million
to be
years.
Rich
I know
Rebar.
that that's not my trajectory, but I also know that my trajectory isn't the counselors, and I would never want it to be that, because that's his niche. That is his field of play. Don't try to step into it. Be different. Do something different. But I just had to bring him up because he's taking over the universe right now. And for those of you guys that don't know who he is, you're not going to really find him on Twitter. He's an Instagram guy. He's a YouTube guy. Which is so weird for us, because I feel like our world is Twitter, our small little clique, and it's tiny.
100%. 100%. And it's so much smaller than either two of those platforms as well, which is, and this is the genius behind the counselor. He found his springboard and he took off, and I just get so excited when his videos are on the timeline and they aren't by Pete Overzet. Like, Pete's not bringing them there, but like other people are stumbling across them and they're furious about it. I'm just like, this is so good. It's so good. It's like, it's just being like reborn every single time.
He's just bowling strikes, dude. Getting people
so
to hate. The hate's as good as the
clearly
like
it's better.
sometimes.
He's incredible. So if you haven't checked him out, you really should check him out. He's super entertaining. We all strive to be that entertaining. Russ, let's go out on a high note. AJ Brown has been banged up for part of the season so far. Corey Davis is finding new life. Is this the breakout that we had hoped for? Is it happening in front of our eyes, or is this a mirage?
So I saw a fantasy analyst that will remain unnamed talk about how he's the Devontae Parker of this year.
Was it the counselor? Did the counselor say
no?
That? Okay.
But what I will tell you is, this guy was good 2 years ago. He was the number one wide receiver in an NFL offense. He garnered more than 100 targets in the season. He already broke out. I believe he had 891 receiving yards in 2018, if I'm correct on that. And for all my research, I look at how many 800 or more receiving yard seasons did you have? And once you cross that bar, that means you're fantasy relevant. Can you go? Yes, 891 in 2018. That's a breakout. He already broke out. This already happened 2 years ago. He's just been injured. So what's happening now should not be a surprise. He does have a much better quarterback now. And I was buying him all this offseason hoping for 2021 value, but he fell into my hands sooner than I expected. But I was kind of always expecting him to come around like a Robert Woods. Robert Woods was productive for 4 years in Buffalo. He just had Tyrod Taylor throwing him the ball. Got to LA, all of a sudden he's 1,200 yards a season. Robert Woods never changed. Corey Davis was always good. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I remember I with Davis specifically, and especially as it relates to AJ Brown, because AJ Brown is another player that all three of us obviously gravitated towards too. So kind of rough seeing the injury start to add up so early this season. But with Corey Davis, I remember Russie, probably the last time you were on the show. If it wasn't the last time, it was the time before that. But you, just as you said, you were the guy that was saying in any dynasty league you were in, you were gobbling up as much Corey Davis as you could on the cheap, I would assume, because people just, again, they didn't
15th
exercise
round of startups this offseason.
Crazy. So people weren't exercising that patience that you've been preaching, or just, this is a player coming out, the early breakout at Western Michigan. He was the one who, John Moore back at RotoViz, man, this was the Phenom Index, right? This was Corey Davis, and so much was built on Corey Davis coming out of school and what he did and how he projected. And, this was a player that a lot of, fantasy gamers kind of cast aside last year. And you were the smart one, Russie, gobbling him up on the cheap and now reaping the rewards early on. Again, Tannehill's certainly an upgrade. So sometimes you got to kind of have that fall into place, of course. But again, Davis checked those boxes that we want checked. And it's not far-fetched. This shouldn't be surprising to anybody.
And I'll throw out one more thing before we head out. I know we're running out of time, even though we're way running out of time. But KJ Hamler was a third-round rookie pick, and he went in the second round of the NFL draft. That's hey, Dynasty community, that's inexcusable. Chase Claypool, 3rd round rookie pick. These guys are good. And KJ Hamler dropped because of year 1 situation, and now it's week 3, and he's going to be fantasy relevant in year 1. So just remember that next year when some guy goes to a wide receiver depth chart with 3 guys perceived in front of him, just buy him anyway. Just buy him. Just buy Van Jefferson. Just get them. They're free. They're free. Just get them. Just get them.
Russ, I think we're going out on that. I wanted to circle back to Corey Davis, but I think that's an eloquent way to go out. Russ, we went way over the time that I had told you that we were going to go for. Ryan's probably going to piss his pants right now. He drank a whole jug of water. It's impressive. That's like a month's worth of water for me. So, Russ, man, plug everything that you would like to plug. Where can people find you? Where is your work? Let them know.
Yeah. Hey, guys, you can follow me on Twitter at Russell J. Clay. Writing at fantasyguru.com. Have a great staff over there. I'm really, really proud of the group we have over there. Tyler Beaker is a monster. And we kind of talked about Rich Rebar earlier. I mean, Tyler is just that the numbers guy that is the numbers guy. And I pretend to be sometimes. So he's really great to have as an asset. Armando Marsal's really, really great with customer service and his own analysis. And of course, our fearless leader, Jeff Mans, who is grinding away on Sirius XM radio over there. So really proud of the product. And if you guys want to come hang out, check out my Dynasty article and enjoy the season with us. Thanks.
I love it, man. Well, we will be back next week, and the next time you guys hear us, we will be on Roto Underworld Network. So probably the same audience. You can just pick us up in the other feed. It's gonna be a wild ride. So we'll see you guys on the other side.